Drivetime Radio with New York Vinnie.
On this week's edition of Yo, Vinnie, what are you driving this week? What about the show?
Yo, Vinnie, what are you driving this week?
Have a little fun. It is a fun day here out at
You're listening to Drivetime Radio.
Remember, just plug in. I'm ready.
And we are ready for another edition of Drive Time Radio with your good friend, New York Vinnie. Thank you so much for spending a Saturday morning with us. We got a good show set up for you this morning. Probably something a little different than you might be normally used to on the show. But, we try to change things up for you every once in a while. Give you something that, you can learn a little something from the show. Something that you can amaze your friends with and shock the world with. Shock the world. Remember that from, what was it, I think it was the 2005 Super Bowl when Mike Holmgren said, we're going to shock the world. And that's what we try to do on the show every week, shock the world. I am your congenial car talking host, New York Vinnie, and every Saturday morning we get together around 11 o'clock and talk about cars and all the things that go on around cars. We tell you about what's coming up with new cars, with used cars. We road test different models of new cars so we can give you reports every week. We help you buy a car, or we point you in the right direction for the best people to get you the car you want. We just try to have a community that's formed around the love of cars. Back many, many, many years ago, people used to be in community about cars. People would hang out with their cars and, what's cars and coffee now, usually on a Saturday morning, used to go on every night when the car was king of the teenage scene. Not so much anymore, although there are still the pockets and the places where people are really into their cars, and people hang out with them. You go to places like Dick's Drive-In, you go to places like the Pickwick and different, mostly centers around food, I think, or down to Golden Gardens on a Friday or Saturday night. And there's people hanging out with their cars and they're getting together, and most of the time they're having fun. Sometimes some people get stupid around it. But for the most part, people have a good time. And we try to foster that good time to make it a little more exciting, to give you a little sense of what's going on with other people in the car world as well. And toward that end, we try to present you with interesting guests and interesting people that have something to say in the car world. We sometimes even take phone calls in the car world or from the car world, I guess, or interviews and different things. But we just try to be a community every Saturday morning. So please tell your friends about what we do here. We're always happy to see you and always happy to see them and get together. And, of course, we're on a ton of social media platforms. We're on Facebook and X and all of them. YouTube, we're on YouTube channel, and we add stuff onto the YouTube channel all the time, so it's always good to go back there and check the channel out. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel or liked this show, please smush that like button, hit that subscribe button, and join us every Saturday morning at 11 o'clock or thereabouts to talk about cars. All right. This week we got some interesting stuff for you. We'll have our Vinnie. What are you driving this week? Will be coming up here in just a short amount of time because a little later in the show, we're going to have my weekday partner, Michael Knight, join us as we talk about something that, sometimes we stray off of the car subject a little bit because something comes along that really ultimately affects cars as it does people that drive cars, or some nostalgia about cars, or a lot of different things that go on around cars. And this week, matter of fact, just yesterday, one of those events happened. So we wanted to get my good friend Michael on to talk a little bit about radio in cars as we are saddened at the news of the death of Neil Sedaka has visited upon us. Sedaka died yesterday. And Neil Sedaka, if you were around in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, was one of the main stars, not only for writing songs, but performing songs. I did like Happy Birthday, Sweet 16, Oh Carol, a chain of hits that were very popular, especially if you grew up listening to rock and roll radio. And we'll talk with Michael a little bit about how rock and roll radio and cars so went together in the 50s and the 60s. It was amazing, the synergy between the two. If you weren't around then, stick around because you'll get an education as to what happened around cars and around radio and around, the togetherness of so many kids. The radio was that era's social media. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more coming up. If you are down at the Cars and Coffee in with our friends down there in Shoreline, a very good morning to you. We have the Shoreline people always join us. I'm always told that there's a couple of people down there that have the show on. And we appreciate that. And hope that in the next couple of weeks, we'll get down there and do our show live from Shoreline Cars and Coffee. It's right by the right in back of the Aurora Borealis. If you're going down Aurora Avenue, in North King County, there in Shoreline, you'll see the Aurora Borealis, and just go through the alley there, or go around the back of the building, and you'll see just a collection of the sweetest cars that I think you've ever seen. I mean, it's a a really wonderful collection of people, not just of cars, but of people as well that bring their cars down to Shoreline and get together and talk. It's as I say, it's a really friendly and welcoming community. So if you want to learn about cars, if you want to, hands-on look at cars, well, don't touch their cars. People get a little sticky about that. But if you want to learn more about collector cars or anything around that, or a particular model of car, I mean, I hear so many times somebody will walk up to a car there and say, "Oh, my dad had one of these when I was a kid, and I remember riding in the back seat, and how come I don't feel that with my current car?" And I think that's true. I think cars, in many ways, because the way they are built is legislated so much by the government, and they have to conform to standards. And there's been just a crazy thing going on with electric cars over the past couple of years that the cars don't have, for many people, the soul that a car used to have. And therefore, people, they don't feel, and this is not all people, but this is, masses of people don't feel the same way, don't hang out in their cars or with their cars as much as they used to. That's just a fact of life. But that's one of the things that we'll delve into a little later this morning. Also, the a few other things that are going on. You are and you should keep an eye on the oil prices because we now see that war has broken out, or at least a police action has broken out with Iran. And if you were around the last time we had a big conflict with them, it drove the price of oil through the roof. So just when you were getting used to that low price of gas, yeah, you show me where you see $1.80 gas, pal. But it's where where you thought you'd seen that, or maybe thought that that was a real thing. Don't count on it. You don't know what is gonna be when it comes to oil prices right now. The best thing you can do, and what I like to do, is I always always try to keep up with AAA. They post gas prices. Also, that great website, Gas Buddy, and they kind of keep you apprised of what's going on with gas prices. And so, I mean, you can feel it. You go up to the pump, you know what's going on. You see the prices increasing, and you'll probably see them increase here in the next couple of weeks with this conflict that's going on. As we spoke about during the week, the I don't know the Venezuelan oil that everybody thought might get flooded into the market or lower the price of gas. It's probably going to cost more to make that oil usable for engines in the United States than it's worth. So if you were expecting a big bump downward in prices, you were wrong on that one, unfortunately. So you'll see that and hear more about that as time goes on. But that's something to keep an eye on and to watch. As this will make an instability in the oil prices, and as we know, that directly affects us at the pump. And you just you start to scratch your head and go, every little thing that happens in the world now affects our oil prices. All right, I want to remind you that the show is brought to you by my good friend George Jackson. George Jackson Promotions, GJP, is where he's at on the internet. He has business promotional items that he tailors to what you need for your business. He not only sells you the items, but he consults with you, tells you what the best, whether it's T-shirts or sweatshirts or hoodies or pens or whatever business promotional items that you, your sports team, your business, your family need. George is the guy to speak to. George is a guy that he'll pick up the phone and you talk to him, and you feel like you're doing business with a human being. You're there and you're talking to him and you're doing business, and it's I think a great thing to be able to deal with somebody on a one-on-one basis. Not you go onto a website, you type your stuff in, you get a chat bot that talks to you. No, the only person that talks to you when you call George is George, and he figures out what you need, gets you the best price for it, gets it delivered to you on time, and in this crazy world that we live in today, that's a big accomplishment. But George keeps something going that is so important that we don't see anymore, and that is service. When you're a customer of his for your business promotional items, he makes sure that he guides you every step of the way. He helps you buy the right thing for what you need, and he does it in a very engaging and helpful manner. So you don't have to worry about any kind of insanity around, not getting it. It didn't come. It went to the wrong address. Somebody stole it off my porch. Somebody did this. You don't get that with George. You get straight up advice. You get straight up prices, and you get straight up items delivered to where you need them delivered to when you need them delivered. Simple as that. George Jackson is GJPromo.com. Go to George Jackson Promotions on any of the internet platforms, and you'll see George and the stuff that he has in his catalog. And he has a wide catalog of items from, as I said, from jackets and T-shirts to pens to golf towels, which, one of these days, Michael Knight and I are going to get those golf towels for you. We promise you. We would not... We'll not lag on that. Maybe we're a little slow, but we don't lag on things. All right, I wanted to talk a little bit this morning. We lost a great rock and roll performer yesterday, Neil Sedaka. And for those who are familiar with Neil Sedaka, the songs he wrote, the string of hits he had in the 60s, and then the 50s and the 60s, Oh Carol, Calendar Girl, Happy Birthday, Sweet 16, Run, Samson, Run. And then went through a lull period in his career and then came back with Elton John in the 70s. And Elton John's label, Rocket Records, and had another string of hits. Laughter in the Rain, The Immigrant, and a bunch of songs. Besides that, he also was a major part of the Brill Building and the songwriting that was going on there. He was he and Howie Greenfield were one of the mainstays of those writing teams, that hit factory that was the Brill Building in New York before they all moved it out to California. That's where the hits were being made. And you say, well, Vinnie, what the hell does this have to do with cars? Well, I'm going to tell you. From 1955, 1954, to the middle 60s, the social fabric of youth in this country was centered around the radio, not the television, but the radio. Rock and roll music, the DJs, the people that presented that music. It was, as one DJ said, a whole big happy family. You had these boss jocks that were on who were fast talking, and they gave you the hits and, talked you up to them with, some of them rhymed it, but they became a part of your life. It was appointment listening. It wasn't, you didn't binge, go in and sit down in front of a television set. You got in your car, you turned the AM radio on, and you cruised around all night listening to Wolfman Jack, or listening to Murray Decay, or listening to Cousin Brucey. And that's how you communicated with people. You communicated through that DJ, the sock hops, the dances, the shows, everything that went on. You heard it from that DJ. It was your main source of entertainment, and it was the guy, and in almost every case it was a guy at that time, who led you in this rebellion against, your parents. In some cases, it might have been just a music rebellion. In some cases, it might have been more, but they became this person that you trusted, that you listened to, that you found out stuff from. And as it progressed, when your parents were yelling at you, get that music out of my house. Well, where did you go if you were 18 years old or 16 years old? You went to your car. And you got your car and you got your friends in the car and you turned it on. And there you were in this magic world with this person playing the hits and talking you through the different things that went on in the world in a fashion that they could do it while they were talking you up to the first beat of a song, or as they say in the business, talking you up to the post. I want to bring in my good friend and my partner, Michael Knight, who is going to jump on with us this morning. And we get a chance to say hello to Michael. Michael, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Vinnie. Good morning, everyone on Drive Time. How are you today?
We're doing good, man. Sad about losing Neil Sedaka, but it's funny because I don't know how many people, current rock and roll aficionados from this period of rock and roll know about Neil Sedaka, but this guy was huge in the 60s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and was a big part of that scene of rock and roll radio and how it affected so many people, and was our world. And really from 6 or 7 at night till 11 at night, these guys that worked those hours, these guys that worked at those radio stations, these sweet-talking guys, as the documentary called them, were our leaders, what we listened to, what we listened for.
It was remarkable. We were lucky, Vinny. You grew up in New York. I grew up in San Francisco Bay Area. And we had the radio in those cities that was not better than, but different than a unique professional brand of extraordinary top 40 radio that did extremely well financially, but its effect on the generation, its emotional effect, its sociological effect on the kids that got to listen to the radio of those markets was extraordinary. And it was made up of the remarkably talented people and managers and ownership that put this format in a position to affect the emotional and creative development of the kids that were listening to it. And what you just brought up that was so interesting, that's not a part of radio today, is that the nighttime disc jockey, the guys from 6 to 10 and 10 to midnight, were extraordinarily influential on the kids because that's when they were listening to the radio. It's not the way it is anymore. The nighttime disc jockey is not the factor that he once was. But in those days, in the early days of rock and roll, where the format met the music in a magical way, the nighttime disc jockey had an effect on the market. It was the relationship that was tight and ongoing. And Friday night with your favorite disc jockey on a night when there was a sock hop, or there was a new record release, or there was something that was a cross promotion that created buzz in the town. You can't realize today how important, how magical those events were, that relationship was, that exchange between the listener and the DJ, and the hits of the day. It was impossible to describe now because there's nothing like it on radio these days. People have an effect. I guess you would say right-wing talk radio has taken the position of rock and roll top 40 radio in terms of the relationship between the audience and the host, the DJ, the jock. And that's not exactly what we were doing in those days. You would probably characterize it as living a crest of emotion and social change that started with rock and roll, but through music as the center point of it, and rock radio, top 40 radio as the delivery mechanism. If you're driving down the road, the accompaniment of the music to the car, to the drive, to the cruising, to the individuals in the car with you. 4 guys in a car driving around Queens on a Friday night listening to WABC, or maybe some of the stations before that, WMCA, were part of an exchange, an emotional exchange.
Right.
That the music was coming right down the street with the buildings of New York echoing it. And it was a magical Friday night. There was nothing but possibilities, nothing but anticipation of something that was coming. The energy was right there with you, keeping you awake, keeping you alert.
Yeah, and you had these little 2-minute vignettes that were played that would strike you because you'd broken up with a girlfriend, because you had a car of a certain kind, because you were in a situation, because they were funny. And there were these 2-minute, songs that were played. Not many of the songs reached 3 minutes. I mean, if a song was 3 minutes, it was a long song. And each song was played individually so that the jock, the presenter, the jock, the DJ could talk a little bit either about that song or about the situation that might have been going on in town or in the world or this or that. Not in a political manner. It wasn't political. It was just informational. Didn't get political until the 60s and progressive radio. At that point, and Sedaka and Greenfield and the writers, Phil Spector and Ellie Greenwich and Jeff Barry and all of those writers had their fingers on the pulse of what was going on in teenage America, in teenage New York, in what the kids that were going to school were dealing with. You go back and you think about Dion's Teenager in Love. And I mean, what kid didn't go through that? Why must I be a teenager in love? And he gave you the words, but the DJ gave you the personal touch that brought you into it. He was the voice that said, it's going to be all right if you're a teenager in love. That emotional tie at that time of rebellion against your parents. Don't forget, this was a time when you didn't listen to the same music your parents did. In many houses, the music was forbidden. So besides the fact of the DJ being there for you in this wacky, sometimes rhyming, sometimes way that seemed to be like a guy that understood you, even though he was, probably 20 years older than you were, but they had this sense of understanding you and a sense of an adult telling you it's going to be all right. Not all adults are against you. I'm here every night from 7 to 10, and I'm your buddy. I'm your friend. I'll tell you where to go dancing. I'll tell you what pimple cream to buy. I'll tell you where to take your car to get it serviced at MCO. I'll give you all the information you need, and I'll also be there for you no matter what, Monday to Friday, 5 nights a week, and I'll have a weekend guy. And anytime you get in your car, there'll be somebody there for you to listen to and make you feel comfortable.
And that exchange that we had with requests and dedications and calling the DJ and asking for your favorite hit and the countdown that night of what's the top 10 today? What are the big records tonight? And we'll count them down 9 to 10 this evening. And remember, there was no top 40 radio for your parents. There was no top 40 radio for your older brother. It came in a time for you and for your kids and for your classmates. And it was your product, and it was your emotional connection to a media that had never been there before. The music didn't exist before. Rockabilly was the precursor to rock and roll, but it, there was nothing before that that served the same emotional necessity for your parents, for your older brother, for the kids that were seniors in 1949. There was no rock and roll for them. By the time the 50s started, that's when you had an opportunity to let the music reflect the changes in society, and for radio and your car to be the center of that. That was your own private concert hall. And did you ever get into somebody's car and the radio was so loud you couldn't even talk because they had been in that position to crank it up, drive down the road, they're picking you up. When you get in the car, you got to turn the thing down, man. I can't even hear. You don't realize how loud it was. You didn't realize how far you were into it. You didn't realize what you had done because it was Dwayne Eddy, 40 miles of bad road, and you just couldn't believe that song. You had to crank it up.
Yeah, and that was the thing too. And you really brought up a good point. Is that you got lost in that world.
Yes,
it took you away from, your father who might have been screaming at you because you didn't do one thing right, or you got a bad test, or you something happened to you. Somebody rode you. Nowadays kids go and they write it on social media, and and their friends react back to them, and they put it out there, and it's there for the world to see. Radio, in the way it was set up, now it wasn't that one-to-one communication, but it was one-to-many communication. And the guys that were the popular DJs, they weren't just song presenters. They were psychologists. I mean, not really, but through their experience, became psychologists, became people who understood what the teenager, what the young person in America was going through.
And think of the rollout, Vinny. KFWB, Color Radio 98 in Los Angeles, had a 50 share. One out of every two radios in Los Angeles was tuned to KFWB. Half of the total radio audience of LA on any given day and night was listening to that radio station with B. Mitchell Reed and Bobby Dale and Gary Owens and Ted Randall and all the gang. A remarkable feat. I can't think of another major market radio station that had a 50 share. Right now, you can be number one in this town with a 3 or a 4 share, where you have just a sliver of that gigantic audience. But to imagine what it would be like to have half of the radios in Los Angeles at any given time listening to one station playing top 40 music, playing Connie Francis, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And Neil Sedaka was part of that musical creation that helped keep that station popular.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really and the reason we really, listen, I'm a big Neil Sedaka fan. You know this. You've heard me rant and rave throughout the years about why he hasn't been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Damn their eyes.
No, there's no why. I mean, why? Why not?
Yeah, there's no reason for it. Except for somebody has a hard-on for him. That's the only thing I could think, because there's no logical reason why he shouldn't be there. The string of hits that he wrote, that he performed, not just for one generation, but really for two. I mean, here's a guy who made the transition into that. Now they call it yacht rock radio, but that 70s soft rock. But it was interesting because it was he was writing some very meaningful songs, some beautiful songs. You go back to that album Sadak Is Back, or the stuff that he did with Elton John. I mean, Elton John recognized his talent and put him on his record label.
Because they were both piano players. That's why
Right,
Elton John loved Neil Sedaka.
And Sedaka was a great piano player. He'd studied at Juilliard. He was one of the world's acknowledged concert pianists. I mean, this guy knew how to play a piano. There's I was looking at some tapes last night of him on the Ed Sullivan Show, and it was interesting because he did a couple of rock and roll songs, but he did a stirring version of My Yiddish Mama.
Really?
Yeah, on the Ed Sullivan Show. And Sullivan didn't want to let him perform it. Said it was too Jewish for the show. And Sedaka told Sullivan, well, if I don't perform My Yiddish Mama, then I don't perform the other songs. And Sullivan acquiesced him, said, okay, do it.
Wow.
And a beautiful version. Again, I don't know if that worked against them when they consider him for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but that period of time, that 1953, 54, all the way up to really 67, 66, 67, when all of a sudden somebody discovered FM radio, and all of a sudden, it's funny because it's like everybody grew up. The jocks grew up, and they weren't the hard pounding on the tape, on the phone book, that they became hip. They became more.
The presentation and the energy changed entirely.
Yeah. It wasn't that energy. I mean, when you listen to those jocks in the morning. You got out of bed, man. You were going. It was like speed, it kept you up. Their cadence, their rhythms, their ability to say things and present things in that style, it kept you going. In the morning. I mean, I don't know how much coffee they drank in those days, but it must have been a lot. And also, many of these guys were not afraid to play Black music. We're not afraid to play music that many of the program directors on a lot of these stations, especially in the South and in the Midwest, didn't want to play. It was what they used to call race music. And again, it's hard to believe sometimes that there was a time when radio stations did not play a song solely because it was done by a Black artist.
And the uncompromising music that was coming from Little Richard, for instance, put them in a position to say, well, if Pat Boone has a version of this, we'll play his version. But we can't play Little Richard singing True Fine Mama. It's too Black. The energy is all wrong. We can't have Negro energy like that on the radio. That's not what the parents would, and the sponsors and the management will say that's too much. We can't have that on the air. If that's what the kids want, we're not down with it anymore. We'll have to come up with something else for them. But they can't have that music. They can't have it. Now, when Motown Records found the formula to presenting Black music that white audiences could absolutely love and consume, and they could make hits with the Supremes and the Temptations and the Four Tops. That was the key. They outsmarted Top 40 radio. And the home that Motown Records and Stax Volt Records found had previously not been welcome to Black music. Now, suddenly, it was part of the Top 40 structure. And the success of the stations was bent upon having not just a white audience, but a Black audience too. The Black teens had to be part of the magic. And this led directly, without any doubt in my mind, to integration and a change in attitudes in the races in America. And music led the way because it was uncompromising. It said, we're going to dance to this song. You're going to listen to My Girl by the Temptations, and you're going to understand that the Black kids are having the same problems with their adolescence that you are. The same gifts and magic that they are going through is an indication that we're alike, we're the same. And the music paved the way for that. And it became plain. That became plain to anybody in their car listening to their radio that the Supremes were singing to them.
And you just mentioned it, the car. The car is where the predominant part of this took place. If it wasn't on the street corner, well, in the major urban areas, if you were in the suburbs or if you were in, the Midwest or in the country, it took place in the car. You got in your car on Friday night, you picked up a bunch of guys or your friends or girls or whatever, and you met at different places, the drive-in or the dairy freeze or, whatever place. And there were, car radios and there were stations. If you were in the Midwest, you got stations out of Chicago. You got a taste of that urban lifestyle, that sophistication that was Chicago. Even if you were living in Ames, Iowa, or you were living in Montana, even. I mean, in those days, they had radio stations called clear channel stations that spread halfway across the country.
And and you learned quickly. You wouldn't have to hear the song 4 or 5 times to figure out what was going on. The first time you heard it, it meant something to you. It spoke to you. It gave you an emotional twist based on the energy and the theme of the song. And you can remember. I remember the first time I heard Yesterday in the car with my dad, listening to the radio. By the way, that's something that you had to fight over. Who had control of the radio when your parents were driving? Well, and my parents knew better than to argue with me about that. I had to have KEWB, KYA, KSAN, whatever the station was that was popular at that time, had to have it on. And they didn't get a vote.
Yeah, it worked a little different in my house. My dad had the complete control of it.
He was listening to WNEW AM.
He was always listening to. Actually, there was this station called WPAT out of New Jersey, and they played the beautiful music. They played Sinatra. They played that stuff, and that's what he was into. They played some of the Italian music. So between that and WNEW with the Make Believe Ballroom with William B. Williams, that was his thing. And if we were going somewhere, he'd get in the car and turn on the radio, and then we'd start driving, and then something would happen, and I'd go reach over and turn the radio to WABC, and he'd listen to it for a couple of minutes, and something would come on he didn't like, and all of a sudden, boom, it was gone. He's back on WPAT, but it was interesting because I noticed as years went on, he changed. Now, he didn't become a rock and roll radio listener, but he softened as to that. He was more interested in listening to some of the stuff, and that was because he had a lot of kids that worked for him, and in the gas station, the repair shop, they wanted to hear their music while they were working. They didn't want to hear WPAT. If you want to listen to that crap, you go in the office and listen to it. If we were out in the tow truck or we were out in the service car or something, it was rock and roll that the kids were listening to. And being as he wasn't paying them a whole lot of money, he at least said, well, if I let them listen to the radio, and that was it. It was how much draw the radio had. If you got a truck with a radio, you got a car with a radio, you work for less money than if you work for a place that didn't have radios in their truck.
And a strange thing with FM was nobody had FM. The format moved to FM because there was a void there. You could institute, begin, and start the success of a new format and a new presentation, a new energy. But nobody had an FM radio. The manufacturers did not make FM radios to put in your car. There were conversion things, but mostly people were listening at home. And the problem was you're listening at home to WNEW FM or WOR FM or WPIX FM. You get in the car and all you had was WABC. The energy was wrong.
Right.
You couldn't bring your music with you to the car like you had before. The industry had to change. And imagine what's that like today. how can you say all you have to do is everybody has to get a different radio? Everybody has to get another receiving unit. Everybody has to figure out a way to get their music in their car. It was a revolution. It was an eruption of changing the AM to the FM for the car and for the necessity of taking your music with you. And it became it happened slowly, then it happened faster, and then it just was the gates were broken and FM was in the cars.
Well, it's always been so interesting and so fascinating to me how much the car was such a big part of our social life. Now we see that to a certain degree in current day, hanging out and stuff. I mean, there's a group of kids who are still, their cars are their temples and they fix them up and everything. They go and they hang out at the drive-ins, but nothing like it was in the 60s or the 50s. You go over here to Dick's Drive-In, and on a Friday or Saturday night in the summer, there'll be 25, 30, 40, maybe 50 cars hanging out, and everybody's got their car done up and the kids are hanging out and when I was younger, you were younger, we go to places. I know Cross Bay Boulevard was a big spot where, there'd be 1,000, 2,000 cars on Cross Bay Boulevard on Friday or Saturday night with the radios blasting. And there was only a couple of radio stations. You didn't have MP3s or that. So, the best you kind of got is at one point you got like 8-track tapes for recorded music in your car. But if you were listening to the radio, there was 2 stations or maybe 3, or maybe you got another station out of, New Jersey or Philadelphia or Boston or something like that. But, it was ABC and MCA. And then when FM came along, you would, moved over, you were kind of defined by the FM station. Were you a WPLJ fan or were you a WNEW FM fan, which was the more progressive, more hip sounding station than WPLJ for a long time. It was, but it always centered around the socialization of the car. It wasn't, it was almost like they could have gotten rid of the car and just left giving you the radio, which in essence is what's happened. They've got, people now you just get your MP3 player or your phone and you're dialed into music however you want it, but you don't have the DJ. You don't have the presenter anymore. You don't have that guy or that woman, but that guy in most cases that kept you all real. And Bruce Springsteen said this very well in one of his songs when he introduces it. He says, "There we were. I heard my song on the radio for the first time, and I was sitting there thinking, how many people all over the world or all over the state, New York, were listening to the same thing I was listening to through that ether in space. We're listening to the same thoughts that I was having, was listening to the same thing that the guy on the radio was saying, that all of these people were listening to it and all these people were thinking about it. And the transference of thoughts in Thunder Road was reaching all of these people at the same time. It was amazing. He said it was the most profound thing that he had experienced until that time, except when he bought his first guitar. It always struck me how he got that, how he wrote to that. He wrote to that automotive, that car experience in a lot of his music. Loving in a car, breaking up in the car, sitting in his car on the hill outside the mansion, going to, somebody once said about Bruce Springsteen, he never, he can't go to the 7-Eleven without singing about it. and it's true. It brought the car even more into the realm of the socialization of that time.
And soon thereafter, the traditional AM radio in a 56 Chevy was not a very impressive thing. The speakers, I don't know how they were developed, but it was a bare bones setup, and it sounded pretty good. It somehow, the way it resonated in the car, it sounded great. Later on, you could get a custom system, Blaupunkt or some other aftermarket setup that would be like a stereo system, a hi-fi system for the car. They began to make those things available for the guy who was working on his car a lot. He wanted to detail it before he took it to Dick's, but he also wanted the right sound system in it. And if you had a good sound system to go along with your fine, bined out car, you had a gold mine. And there weren't a lot of choices to be had, but auto stereo shops started popping up, and people could redo their sound system because the factory setup was bare bones and not that impressive.
I remember when Pontiac, I think it was just Pontiac at first, and then I think they spread to Oldsmobile. I don't know if Chevy ever had them, but they had that reverb switch on the dashboard, and you could hit that little switch, and it would feed the sound back through the speakers again, so you would get that echo that you got in the studio in your car, and it was the wildest thing you ever heard, because all of a sudden you had this, it wasn't just the flat notes coming out of the speaker, but it was reverb. It was wah, 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 wah,
another dimension.
Yeah, it put a body into the music that wasn't there before. Now, of course, a couple of years later, stereo came along in cars and FM, and it made that kind of obsolete. But you were able to get that sound of and it was funny because you never realized it when it was going on, but if you listen to tapes and stuff after, the reverb that the jocks used in their presentation in the cars, on the radio that got into the cars, was amazing too, because all of them had that booming bottom end sound that made them sound godlike almost.
If you ever listen to Spanish language radio, they were the kings and the chief practitioners of the reverb sound. Every commercial would have an echo and a reverb and audio tricks that they used much more than the conventional white guy radio, white guy top 40. Spanish radio was famous for their echo and their reverb and their audio tricks.
Oh yeah, WRDO, Radio Wado, in Nueva York, go. But then the voice would come out the top of the hour, go WADO, New York. The only English that they spoke the whole day, because they had to do the station IDs in English.
Just the opposite with some of the Mexican radio stations that would broadcast across the border. They had to do the top of the ID in Spanish.
So, and what was their what was it? What they were C? No, they weren't C's. That was Canada. What was them?
X's.
X, right? XR, XTRA, and
XERB. Right.
It was it was just such a time for cars, but it was also such a time for the way, now we talk about cars communicating with each other, and we talk about computer and LiDAR beams and, so many things. The cars literally communicated with each other. Now, back then, you had the one voice that communicated with so many people in so many different cars and brought them together and really created a sense of community out of these people. If you were a teenager in your, in those years, in the late 50s and the 60s, you had a place to go. You had somebody who you kind of thought understood what you were going through and what you were feeling, and that was the DJ. Somebody to put a good face on it. And there were serious moments too. I'm not going to say that that the DJs got in calls and stuff about people that were in different situations, but you just always felt like there was somebody who spoke your language. In those situations that you might find yourself in, and had the answer for the best pimple cream. I mean, they knew whether you should get Stridex or
Hey.
what was the other one? I forget. But anyway,
It's a good question. What is Stridex? I can't think of another example of the pimple cream.
Oh yeah, what was it? Yeah, Stridex was because that was the pads, not Desinex. I don't know. I can't remember now. Well, listen, Michael, thanks for taking some time, man. I really thought that we should, not that Sedaka was everything to radio because he was a part of this big machine, but he was one of the people that created the sound that attracted teenagers, that made radio more important to teenagers than television in the house. And the place that you listened to radio in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s was in your car. You
Can't hear you, Vin.
and it really brought everybody together. It was a great thing. So I appreciate you jumping on and chiming in on that, man. I'll see you. When will I see you? I'll see you Monday.
We'll see you Monday at about 10:10, and we'll talk about the world at war.
I talked a little bit about that at the beginning of the show, and watch your gas prices go up.
They're on their way. And also you can see if the topic of go to war, don't go to war is a factor on AM radio for the adults that are listening to that product on their way to work on Monday. See how well that translates as a vital topic of discussion.
Yeah, it's not going to be, this isn't going to be pretty, I don't think. Certainly, well, war never is, but I don't know.
Especially war that prevents you from understanding the Epstein tapes.
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine that. All right, Michael, I will see you on Monday, man.
See you then.
Take care. Thanks again, Michael. That's our good friend Michael Knight, who joined us to talk about a topic that I always wanted to cover, just didn't find the right vehicle until the unfortunate death of Neil Sedaka. And I hope you got something, a little bit of education out of that show and out of that conversation. All right, want to jump into Yo Vinnie. What are you driving this week?
And orange seatbelts. It's another edition of Yo Vinnie. What are you driving this week?
Yo, Vinnie, what are you driving this week?
Okay, why are we not getting... okay. Now, for some reason, okay, we'll try to do this again. There we go. And this is, let's start it from the beginning again.
Bright lights and orange seatbelts. It's another edition of Yo Vinnie. What are you driving this week?
Yo, Vinnie, what are you driving this week?
All right, this week I am driving the Genesis GV70. This 2026 Genesis is, listen, I'm a big fan of this car. I just got in it on Thursday, so we're going to take it through its paces. Actually, we're going to go up to the Joe today and take it around. But, in the compact SUV space, the luxury compact SUV space. Genesis has really, since their inception, put out a great product. The 2026 gets some changes to the front and rear fascia. Been slightly restyled, not a major updating, but an updating nonetheless. Some changes in the tail lights and so on and so forth. And the edition that I'm driving has and that is the Sport Prestige 3.5 Turbo. It really is a spacious, roomy, well-designed, well-laid out vehicle. When you look inside this thing, I mean, take a look at the seats, take a look at the color. I love the orange stitching, the orange seat belts that are in this car. It kind of wakes you up when you get in it. It's not your normal luxury SUV. The quilted seats that present to you kind of a feeling of I don't know. The seats are very comfortable, and they feel maybe a little bit more comfortable with that quilting. The headrests are really nicely done, so you don't jam your head back into them. They're perfectly angled. Lots of space in the rear as well, including controls for heating and air conditioning and heated seats and so forth. And plenty of room for luggage, plenty of room to, if you have to put down seats, if you have to go to the back and change something, there's plenty of room there, plenty of ability to do it. These seats fold down and give you a nice amount of space so that if you're out shopping, garage sailing, you got to put a big box in the back of the Kiwi 70, you have the ability to do it. And even with the split 60-40 seat, you still have room for passenger in the back as well as putting all your stuff back there. Nice, underfloor, a little bit of storage there. You open that up and you got a spare tire, a temporary spare tire, as opposed to just one of those things that you plug in, one of those kits. Nicely done. Has Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Interior is beautiful. You can see, the brakes, the wheels, the exterior of this vehicle. Those wheels are stunning. They're apt at that great space is absolutely stunning. There you see the front fascia that's been improved, changed the design a little bit, and then you get under the hood and you really see the 3.5 turbo all-wheel drive, which is 75 horsepower, 8-speed automatic. That is just a very smooth driving, very powerful engine. And it has all of the safety stuff that you would expect in a vehicle like this. Just all of the stuff that a vehicle like this should have, including lane keeping, awareness of where your eyes are going, so that if you go, the monitors for the traffic signs. It has a voice that tells you if there's a traffic camera up ahead, if things that can be hazards to you. The display on this thing that goes in one screen all the way across, 27-inch OLED display. It's clear, it's concise. They really have a nice thing with this. They use a dial, and the dial, you turn it and it moves to different segments of what you're trying to control with the display. And I really like the format of it. The only thing that maybe is a little wonky on this thing is they have a dial for the display, and then right under it is the dial for the transmission, for the shifter. And a couple of times now I've touched the dial for the OLED display and sat there and started to go, why is the car going in reverse? And then realized that I'm touching the OLED display dial instead of the gear shift dial. So you got to watch out for that. The one thing that I really enjoyed in this thing last night, I took it out in the evening and put it into the sport mode, and the suspension tune, when you put it into sport mode, really gets down and hugs the road. I mean, it was really going over. It's interesting. A lot of times when you put these cars into that sport mode, it'll tighten up the suspension to give you a bumpier ride. Genesis has figured out a way to put it into sport mode and mitigate that harshness in the suspension to be able to give you a softer ride, but yet not lose the connection with the road that you're looking for. Again, it's not a sports car, it's an SUV, but they really do a nice job of tuning this suspension to carry the power of this 375 horsepower engine to all the wheels, and to make the ride not a rough, bumpy ride, but a smooth and luxurious ride. You really feel it in this vehicle nicely. And I'm a big fan of this car. I think I will put this car up against a BMW or a Mercedes. It's that simple. I know some people say, well, what do you... No. You drive this car, you drive a BMW, and you tell me that, that it's comparable to that vehicle. Hyundai, who makes the Genesis, has really done themselves proud with this GV7. It is also electrified versions of this. If you want it, there's a lower 2.5 turbo all-wheel drive, 300 horsepower version, 2.5 liter. Doesn't give you the power. I would definitely go for the 3.5 liter version in this. But most of the different magazines and reviewers really like this car. They really look at this car and say that the Genesis has themselves a winner. Also, the Ceres Blue paint that's on this car. It's a $650 option on this car. Is a stunning color, especially with the wheels, which are a unique design. You don't see these wheels anywhere else. Anyway, the sticker price with freight and handling, which is $1,450. The sticker price on the car is $72,225. And I think I'm just one of the people that really like the car, really think that that Genesis has themselves a winner here, and really suggest that if you're in the market for this kind of car. Oh, I also didn't mention that powertrain warranty on this car is 10 years and 100,000 miles. That's the same warranty that Genesis and Hyundai and Kia have on all of their cars. And when you get a car like this, I mean, that's a bit of a, puts your mind at a bit of ease. A 5-year, 60,000 mile new vehicle warranty, but that 10-year, 100,000 mile warranty, I think is, powertrain warranty is the best in the business. And I think it takes a little bit when you're buying a car like this, when you're laying out 72,000 plus for a vehicle like this, you want to know that the manufacturer stands behind it. And they do. Oh, and did I mention it has massaging seats? Another suggestion to Genesis really quickly. If you want to stop a lot of arguments among the people that buy this car and their friends, you might want to put a massaging seat in the passenger side as well, because you'll hear about it from the passenger who will say, wait a minute, how come I don't have a massaging seat? It's a small thing, but it's something. And as I said, all the safety technology is there as well. Forward collision avoidance, the backup collision avoidance, lane keeping assist, driver attention warnings, the blind spot. I love that it has a little blind spot camera in the dashboard. So if you have to get into your right lane and you have that spot that you can't see that good in, you can just look at your dashboard and see if somebody's coming up on you in the right lane and drive accordingly. All right. Okay, that's the 2026 GV70 3.5 Turbo Sport Prestige all-wheel drive this week's. Yo, Vinnie, what are you driving this week, car? We'll have a full review of it in an upcoming edition of Drive Time, also on our social media channels. So it'll be there for you to look at, also in our show as well. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Drive Time Radio. I thank you so much for listening to the show today. I appreciate you taking the time, as we always do, to listen to the show. I hope that you enjoyed our little conversation about radio and cars and how much AM radio meant to kids and socialization back in an era that's gone by, that we'll never get back again. But if you were there for it, it was a beautiful thing. I'm New York Vinnie. I will catch up with you on Monday with Mikey, if the Lord's willing and the creek don't rise. Until then, as my good friend Sammy Davis Jr. used to say, peace, love, and Manischewitz, baby. Take care. Have a good one. Thanks for listening.